You know a tutorial system is in trouble when the game keeps stopping to explain things to you, but somehow still leaves you sitting there wondering, okay, but how do I actually do this? And after being told that pine roots can be found near pine trees, I was already starting to lose patience. Welcome back to the High Court of Games, where I, the Queen of Hearts, judge the games that enter these halls. Some are crowned victorious, and others are sent to the graveyard. Today we hold the preliminary hearing of Akiiwan Relaxing Survival. I should disclose that I received a review key for Akiiwan through Keymailer for the purposes of coverage and review. Unlike a full trial where the judgment is delivered after extensive evidence has been gathered, a preliminary hearing examines a game's early evidence, first impressions, and its potential to one day stand among the victors. Akiiwan describes itself as a chill survival adventure with a talking campfire as your guide. Explore, craft, fish, and hunt during the day, and ask your fire 3 questions each night. On paper, that sounds exactly like the kind of cozy survival experience that I should enjoy. A relaxing wilderness adventure, light survival mechanics, a slower pace, a hand-drawn world that's focused more on atmosphere than pressure. But the longer I spent with the demo, the more the game's guidance system started working against that cozy atmosphere instead of supporting it. Visually, Akiiwan has a pretty interesting style. At first glance, the world looks 3D, but a lot of the environment is actually made up of 2D sprites that rotate to constantly face the player. Things like bushes and trees subtly turn as you move around the environment, and it gives the game a slightly storybook-like look that I actually found pretty charming. So visually, the game made a solid first impression. But once I started actually interacting with the world, little frustrations started piling up surprisingly quickly. One of the first things I noticed was that there's no real central marker or crosshair on the screen, which might sound minor, but because the game relies so heavily on interaction, it often became difficult to tell exactly what I was targeting when I was interacting with tools, objects, or gathering spots. And unfortunately, the confusion wasn't limited to interaction alone. Akiiwan has a really strange relationship with tutorials. The game often wants to explain things to you, but somehow avoids explaining the parts that actually matter. Fishing became a perfect example of that. The demo tells you that fishing is available, and it gives you instructions on how to fish. But nowhere did the game clearly explain how to actually equip the fishing rod or the net in the first place. So I found myself sitting there thinking, wonderful, I've learned the philosophy of fishing, shame about the part where I cannot physically start fishing. And as I kept playing, that became a reoccurring problem. Akiiwan regularly pauses to provide guidance, but a surprising amount of that guidance either feels redundant, unhelpful, or disconnected from what the player is actually struggling with. And that issue became even more obvious during the hunting tutorial. The game tasks you with getting close enough to deer before it will let you hunt them, so it teaches you to crouch in long grass and carefully sneak closer without scaring them away. Then after interacting with the campfire, the game explains that you also need to approach the deer from downwind, which makes sense because the deer are understandably skittish and they'll run if they sense you nearby. So naturally, the whole mechanic starts feeling like a deliberate stealth challenge where the key is learning how to approach the deer carefully without frightening them. And if you're struggling to get close enough, the campfire is able to give you advice. The only problem is that once a day or two has passed without you completing it, the game keeps giving you the same advice over and over again, which basically boils down to just wait and hope that the deer walks closer to you, which completely undermines the mechanic the game just taught you. After a while, those tutorial moments stopped feeling supportive and just started feeling repetitive instead. The campfire system itself also became increasingly exhausting over time. The game constantly pulls you back to the fire to progress to the next day, but some in-game days felt incredibly incredibly short. There were moments where it genuinely felt like I had only been playing for all of 5 minutes before the game was already pushing me to trigger the campfire again. And because you can't quickly skip through any of those interactions, the pacing slowly stopped feeling cozy and just started feeling irritating instead. Particularly when on one occasion, the campfire only had one new question option available. Where do I find pine roots? Now, given that you can only ask 3 questions each night, and this was presented as a brand new dialogue option, I was expecting something a little bit more insightful than pine roots can be found near pine trees, which understandably felt significantly less helpful than the game seemed to think it was, and honestly just added to my irritation with the whole system. And it's where the biggest issue with Akiiwan really became clear to me. The game wants to be relaxing, and I can absolutely see the cozy survival foundation it's aiming for, but instead of helping me settle into the experience, the constant interruptions, repetitive dialogue, unclear interactions, and awkward tutorials just kept pulling me out of it. So rather than feeling immersed, I just mostly felt drained by it. Now, to be fair, this is still an early demo, and there are things here that could improve over time. The visual style has charm, and the cozy survival concept has potential. I do think there's a version of the game that could become a really enjoyable casual survival experience. But right now, the onboarding and tutorial design are doing far more harm than good. Eventually, the irritation just reached a point where I simply stopped playing altogether. Not because the game was difficult and not because survival games aren't my thing, but because it constantly felt like the experience itself was just getting in its own way. So before us today, Akiiwan Relaxing Survival receives the verdict of Entombed. Because despite the potential underneath it all, the experience keeps getting in its own way. But now I want to hear from you. What's more frustrating in games for you? Being given too little information or being constantly interrupted with information that doesn't actually help? Let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future trials from the High Court of Games. Court's dismissed.